Hello, everyone. This is Sam Stecker, Superintendent of East Butler Public Schools, bringing to you another episode of the NCSA Radio Podcast. NCSA is the Nebraska Council of School Administrators. It's your premier organization to increase your professional acumen if you're in educational leadership in this great state. And today, I'm joined by a guy named John. I'll give you a chance to. It's going well. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks for coming out to Norris to meet with me and have a conversation. My name is John Scredd. I'm the superintendent of the Norris School District, and I am in my 6th year as soup at Norris. Been out here since the summer of '04, and worked in LPS as an associate principal before coming to Norris in '04 as high school principal, and have kind of stayed internally and moved on up since that time. So
it's and I have a little bit of a young superintendent story that has to do with John, because way back in the day, a whole year ago, when I was starting off as a superintendent, I was attending my first AASA conference. I sat in on a session on farm to school.
Yeah, great program.
And it's an outstanding program.
Nebraska Center for Rural Affairs
Yes.
does a ton of great stuff around that.
They do.
There's just all kinds of partnership opportunities with schools and local producers through Farm to School.
And they're always seeking to advance those or seeking to make those collaborations happen. But I remember I was sitting there thinking, this is pretty cool. And I was following the session hashtag, the conference hashtag on Twitter. And I didn't know you at all at that point in time. And then I started seeing, well, this guy John from Nebraska is tweeting. And then I went, I think that might be him 3 rows up. And we kind of connected through Twitter
Right,
there.
we were live tweeting the same session.
Exactly.
Not knowing that we were 2 fellow Nebraska administrators in there. Yeah.
And it was nice because I got some advice for you on whether I should pursue it or not and what direction to go, and came home as a rookie superintendent and wrote a $22,000 grant. So
awesome.
I owe you an official thanks.
Congratulations. That's great. It's just a wonderful initiative. And even so, Norris is kind of an interesting amalgamation demographically, where we've still got a very strong agricultural tradition and history. But as Lincoln continues to encroach or grow southward, we become more suburban and takes on a little bit more cosmopolitan flavor. But with that, we've noticed, the kids in our district, as strong as the FFA chapter is, still don't necessarily have that farm to table connection.
Oh, I see what
and
you're
that
saying.
Understanding. And so farm to school is just a great means of really plugging kids into an awareness of how ag works and how it produces what ends up on our tables and in our bellies. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and we're just in our infancy of being part of the farm to school program in East Butler, but we're excited to make some things happen. So
awesome.
So that's been good. First question I'm going to ask you, and I mentioned this on the podcast that I did with Kyle. We're trying to make a tradition that we start off with whoever we interview. Tell us about your favorite teacher that you've ever had. So, first question for you, John.
Yeah, my favorite teacher ever would have been Maggie Ellison. And Maggie was a high school speech, English, and drama coach and teacher. She's someone I worked closely with when I was a Mighty Mustang at Mount Vernon High School in southeast Iowa. And she was all kinds of intense, very passionate about recognizing the author's intent and inhabiting the script and just going all in and making a really sincere commitment to performance. I worked with her on fall plays and spring musical stuff, and had the opportunity to learn from her as a member of the speech team at Mount Vernon High School, and just the passion and the intensity that she brought helped instill in me a love of literature and a love of the performance mode, performing arts, and the opportunity to extemporize, to get in front of people and to do, competed in speech in a number of different areas, And one of them that we did was we took some Lawrence Ferlinghetti's beat poetry.
Yes.
And from snippets from a Coney Island of the Mind, and created like a one-act play around that. Actually, I think it was called Reader's Theater was the competition category. And it was just a really fun environment to be around Maggie, because she believed in the potential of each one of us to accomplish something together. And in that performance dynamic that you get when you're doing a play together, or like the Reader's Theater thing I mentioned, it requires an ensemble commitment. It requires everyone kind of knowing and responding in the moment and in flux to one another, and making something special and memorable happen. And she really helped us do that because she practiced us hard. And in the English classroom, she was someone who inspired us to make connections to pop culture as well. She was someone who had been out and about, so like she
somewhat
had been
worldly.
Yeah, she'd been out. She had this. She had this cultivated sense of culture and knowledge about her that was really cool to be around. So I remember one of the things she had, one of the volumes of poetry that she had, was Bob Dylan's lyric book. And so that was like my initiation to Bob Dylan's masterful lyricism. And she had actually seen the Doors in concert, and disappointingly, which I thought was like the coolest build-up ever when I found out
Of course.
Like, you've seen Jim Morrison live and in concert, and she said, yeah, it was not good.
Kind of a dud show.
Yeah, he was incapacitated, basically.
I imagine that can be a possibility.
Didn't go well. But that was just those kind of stories, and learning that backstory from a teacher when they build a relationship with a classroom of kids. It's exciting to get those unique perspectives on someone's backstory, and share a part of who you are as an individual with the kids when it's pertinent with the class. And she did that, and obviously also inspired us in the performing arts. So she was my most memorable and favorite teacher probably all time.
In listening to that, I'm finding no small amount of skills that you probably develop that I'm guessing you still draw upon at a board meeting every once in a while.
Absolutely. You got to be able to extemporize.
There we go.
You got to deploy those rhetorical skills when summoned.
There we go. Now, John, you are president-elect for NASA. And
yeah, technically now I've been told I'm actually merely president-elect right now.
A double elect.
Right, double elect.
Which is still fair. That's still...
It's something.
It's a position.
It's an emerging something.
It's an emerging something. I like that notion, emerging something. In that position, if you were going to identify a couple of priorities that you see in your service in that office, or some challenges that you would anticipate, what do you think they would be?
Well, one of the things that I think has become a huge challenge for school districts across Nebraska is us working together to forge unity and have a common vision for excellence in public schools, when we have had a lot of, and continue to have, very disparate viewpoints about school finance.
I agree.
And where those resources come from, and the much talked about rural-urban split in the legislature, and the perspectives around that. I fear that sometimes as school leaders, we've allowed that to politicize and polemicize, push us to polar opposite ends in education. And I really genuinely believe there's a lot more common ground than battleground. And so we need to make sure that we're working together to forge a common vision for quality public education in Nebraska, and that we address resource shortfalls in a way that doesn't consist only of saying, hey, I want to make sure I get a little bit wider wedge of that ever-narrowing sliver of the piece of the state budgetary pie for me. That we got to be better than that, and I feel like no one's better equipped from a, the moral high ground vantage point of being public school educators than us folks to be able to say, you know what, let's work together. Let's work together to try and create solutions. And, it's forced us, and I think this is a huge challenge because it's forced us as school district administrators, whether those are assistant superintendents, business managers, or superintendents as the leaders of learning of school districts, it has forced us to learn more about issues like tax structure and tax policy and governance than maybe we would have initially been interested in. But you know what? That's where the fight is.
Absolutely.
And we need to be able to engage stakeholders and engage policymakers in discussions about resources so that we can do the great things we want to do and we need to do within our school districts. So I think there's room. There's a lot of room to progress in that area, and that would be one major issue. There are so many others. Of course, there are myriad issues and challenges. Another one that I would be remiss if I didn't mention is simply early childhood education and the expansion of early childhood ed. And I believe that we ought to be the ones to help promote a vision that says universal preschool is where it's at, and it ought to be viewed not as a privilege of the affluent, but as something that everyone's entitled to create the opportunity for their school readiness the rest of the way through. And then at the other end of it, to bookend it, would be college and career readiness.
Well, certainly.
And it'll be interesting to kind of deal with the implications of, this impending adoption of the ACT as the kind of exit 11th grade assessment in place of NISA, because I'm ambivalent about that. I think there's some positives with that, certainly, and there are some reasons to have a wary or critical eye about that too.
Well, I would agree, and it's kind of hard to find somebody that's ambivalent about that. Most of the time when I ask people about that, they know where they stand.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think I see things on both sides of that. And back to the school finance issue, you spoke to how we have so much common ground. And I think where sometimes the debate gets lost is that every one of us is fighting for our students.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the perception becomes we're fighting for that money.
Yep.
And it's not about the money. It's about how can we provide that best service for our students. And I guarantee every leader in every district across the state, that's what their priority is.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a part of how we need to frame those conversations, Sam, is we need to make sure that we are stipulating that it's about students, it's about impact on student learning, it's about services to students, and that we keep students at the center of the conversation and acknowledge that we know that we need resources to make all that happen.
And I also think it's very poignant that she said it's forced us as superintendents to become educated on some things politically and policy-wise that maybe we would not have. Because the danger is it's easy to be an idealist and say, I'm fighting for the students. But if you don't have the perspective of everything else when it comes to policy and politics, you're going to get labeled as an unrealistic idealist and may not be able to make any progress.
Right. So the fact is that we have to be willing to do a couple things to help forward that and help increase our capacity to have those conversations with policymakers. And one of them is we simply have to build relationships.
I agree.
We have to make the investment to connect with legislators, and not just those in our district, also those on various committees, and not just on the education committee.
Absolutely.
But we have to do the outreach. We have to be willing to show up and to say what needs to be said and to be at hearings, but also outside the scope of hearings. So building relationships is one thing. And simply put, the other thing is we have to be willing to, and thankfully, we have a beacon out there in Mike Delaney as our executive director, who is so knowledgeable and so informed and so articulate about those legislative proposals, that he can equip us with some of that knowledge, and then on occasion we need to have the courage to wade into the minutia and figure out the particular ramifications for our school districts so that we can voice that back, we can message that back to those policymakers, and they're aware of it then when they're making decisions. And, probably none of us had grad courses that taught us how to do that.
I did not.
But we got to be willing to wade into it.
Outstanding. We first started talking a little bit, because I got us off track, about Farm to School, which is a great initiative that you have here at Norris. Next question I have for you, what's happening at Norris right now that you're most excited about?
Probably the initiative that we've undertaken the last 2 years now that I'm most excited about is our instructional program. And that's, we are doing Marzano Instructional Program. Mm-hmm. And we've embraced BART, Becoming a Reflective Teacher, as the platform for that. And we've worked really closely with ESU 6's PD team.
Okay.
Toby Bose has basically led that, along with Lenny Vermas. And they've just done a tremendous job partnering up with us so that they've tailored the professional development that they've delivered based upon the ongoing communication and developing a strategic plan for how we lay that out, how we equip our teachers with research-based instructional strategies, instill a common language for instruction, and maybe most importantly, build or foster a collaborative culture around instruction that has some consistency and cohesiveness, PK-12. And that's something that we've really needed here at Norris as we've continued to grow. Our intermediate school, grades 3, 4, 5 is in its third year now. So when we built that school and we opened it due to growth, we realized then, almost immediately then, wow, we just added transitions in because now we've got kids leaving elementary after second grade.
Yes.
Now they're moving to another building and they're going to the intermediate. And then they go to the middle school at sixth grade. And in adding that, even though we're on one campus, so one might surmise incorrectly that everything is just this completely cohesive, unified approach. Well, we found that sometimes that parking lot could be as wide as an ocean.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to work together to develop a system for instruction. BART, Becoming a Reflective Teacher, and the Marzano Instructional Program around that, and Toby and Lenny and Jill and the team at ESU 6 have been so great to work with, and Toby refers to it as Marzano Light, because he's like, hey, I'm not, I haven't published with Bob Marzano, I'm not Phil Warwick, but I'm a trained trainer, and we have capitalized on that. It's been tremendous. They've been so much fun to work with, and we're now at a point where teachers are doing instructional rounds. We're piloting them this quarter. And it's exciting to see they've developed meaningful goals for themselves, for their own growth as teachers, from a great array of possible areas that Marzano identifies. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, and I love how instruction focused that is. Sometimes it's very easy to get excited about the flashy stuff that goes up on a billboard.
Yeah.
And the day-to-day, we're going to do this right. When I was a principal, I always told my teachers, I will take consistently good over occasionally great anytime.
Right.
And
that's what part of what we've talked about here is that we want to encourage and instill a culture of consistent excellence, not islands of excellence. Like we've got sporadic evidence of excellence here, there, and everywhere, but not thorough, not consistent, not embedded. And that I really believe BART is helping us move in the right direction with that. So it's pretty neat.
That'll be exciting to see the results from that.
Yeah,
I look forward to that. You're one of those people in Nebraska education that I would say embodies being a connected educator. I think you do a great job of putting yourself out there as a resource. And not only that, crediting other people and referring other people and retweeting and all of those things that we do anyway these days. So I think you're going to be a great resource for this. tell me, who is somebody that you think, if you're an educational leader in Nebraska, you absolutely need to follow this individual because they're innovative, they're doing the right thing, they're going to make you better at what your job is?
Yeah, and this is an organizational feed, but I think it's really important that we are following and basically engrossing ourselves in the content that comes from Nebraska Loves Public Schools. And I mention that because I think that there's no finer external organization that has established such a wonderful panoramic perspective of best practice in public schools in Nebraska than Nebraska Loves Public Schools. NE Loves PS. The stuff that they're doing, that Sally Nelson Barrett and her team are accomplishing in creating these wonderful video vignettes and getting that content out there, pushing it online, making it accessible, having opportunities for all of us to follow what they're doing, because they post a lot through Twitter. They have a pretty active Twitter feed, and in fact, I think they've published a list of connected educators.
I think they have as well.
They recommended other Nebraska educators follow, and there's just a lot going on there to celebrate. And public schools have taken a bit of a beating recently.
Yes, we have.
And I think in the national media more so than local media, but nevertheless, even within state media sources, your kind of your daily newspapers and so forth, there's been some just scathingly critical stuff that's come out, and sometimes it's guest op-ed sort of stuff, but it can chisel away at even the strongest demeanor of vigilant commitment to public ed. It can wear on one, right?
Absolutely.
And Nebraska Loves Public Schools is always pushing positive, celebrating excellence, and sharing it in a really compelling narrative format that it's just something that we all ought to avail ourselves of, if for no other reason than to inspire ourselves and remind one another, hey, this is what we're about. This is what we're about.
I am so glad that you brought that up, because in my career as a teacher and as administrator, I have lamented with my peers, people do not know what we do every day. Right. And Nebraska Loves Public Schools has done an amazing job of featuring that in an honest, reflective, celebratory, authentic manner.
Yep.
And it opens that window to everyone else. But I didn't really realize it till you just said it there. As educators, it's just as important for us to watch that for us.
It is. It is.
I've watched those things, and I've seen, colleagues and peers and people I aspire to be as good as, and
right.
It's like when I was a kid and I was watching Rocky.
Yeah.
It's like I could do that.
That's the kind of inspiration you draw from it. It's that, I don't know if you want to call it a daily affirmation or it's your daily zen, but it's that thing that they do such a wonderful job. Nebraska Loves Public Schools of reminding all of us why we're in this and what we're all about, and inspiring us with individual and organizational stories of excellence. And that's just that's must-see TV, in my opinion. I
agree. John, I really appreciate all the perspective you expressed today. Before we close up shop, you got any closing thoughts for us?
I want to throw one thing out there, which is to promote everyone having their own personal wellness plan, and whatever that means for you. I know EHA offers great programming, and you can subscribe, and you've got a daily checklist thing, and you go online and you can qualify for incentives, etc. But what I mean by a personal wellness plan is figure out how to take care of you. For me, I couldn't keep going, and I couldn't sustain the level of energy that I know I need to do a great job as a superintendent if I didn't take care of my own needs in terms of wellness. And for me, that's running. And I am not an elite runner by any means, but I run at this point. Because it's great stress management. It's great stress relief. It helps set my mind right, and everybody needs that thing. Whether it's walking, fishing, getting on the elliptical, going to the gym, kickboxing, hot yoga. I don't know.
Anything.
Anything.
It's funny. It's funny that you said that, because I just finished with my evaluation with my board, and one of the things that was mentioned was Sam needs to make sure that he takes the time to take care of himself.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to make it to the gym today, but tomorrow I'll be at Pinnacle Sports and Fitness fighting
Right
off
on.
chokeholds. I think
Right
it's good
on.
advice.
Good for you. Yeah,
Right
I
on.
just think that's hugely important. And the reason I say that is because so many of us in the vocation work so hard in the service of others. And the fact is, we cannot take care of others if we don't take care of ourselves first. So please do that.
So true. Thank you so much, John. I hope
Yeah,
you guys
thanks, Tom.
have enjoyed this episode of NCSA Podcast. By the way, we are always looking for more people to interview. What we want to do with this podcast is celebrate the great stories like we have going on here at Norris with John all across our great state. So if you're inclined to be on the radio, on the interweb, or you know somebody who we should talk to, don't be shy about getting a hold of myself or Mike at NCSA. Until next time, enjoy all these things in the archives.